Okay, hopefully people can see that.
Yep.
Great. We'll wait for the rate of joining to slow down.
Sounds good.
So we'll get started momentarily once the attendee count flattens out.
Martin, I'm not sure if you saw in the chat, but it would be great if you could post a link to the slides in the chat. If it's possible.
That would be great. Why don't I email it to you? Is it possible for you to actually no? Who is the Rich? Could you put it on the wiki maybe?
I already posted it.
Yes.
Is it on the wiki? Great.
And
Thank
Sam
you.
posted it to the chat. It's a Google Doc.
Oh, okay. I think those might be the edit. That might be the edit link. So this could be an adventure. Okay. I guess we'll get started. Let me find my slides again. Yes. Okay. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for coming. This is an IETF side meeting, which means it has semi-official status. Some of you are not IETF regulars, so I just want to briefly mention the note well, which does apply. This is basically telling you to sort of be aware of the policies regarding IPR. If you have intellectual property involved, you should disclose that, and by all means, type IETF note well into your favorite search engine, and you can read more about this. Also, like, be a professional person, but hopefully that doesn't become an issue here. I will also note that we are recording this meeting. In accordance with IETF side meeting policy, we're not keeping blue sheets, i.e. the formal list of attendees. We will not post such a list. However, and we will keep that. Our intention is not to have a mailing list, because we think discussion will be best held in an open SSL forum. And if there's some future project, the future project will have its own discussion. But we are keeping your email because we may need to have a small number of follow-up communications. I'm almost certain it would be less than 5 in the future, just to tell people what the outcomes of various processes. This is the agenda today. We're in the welcome right now. I'm going to briefly kind of explain what is going on, and then Rich, who has a fair amount of background in just OpenSSL operations and just how governance, will explain where this is coming from and how we can maybe shape that decision. Then finally, Sam Spencer, who is one of the main people behind the current QUIC TLS fork, will talk about some of the challenges in doing a long-term fork should we be forced to go to that. And then we'll have plenty of time for open discussion. We have an IETF norm of when the desire to talk is congested, to use +Q and -Q in the chat function there to just create a queue of people to talk. We'll see how that goes. If it becomes necessary, we'll invoke that mechanism. So thanks for your.
Teams also has a hands up mechanism. Daniel's just demonstrated.
All right. Well, we could do that for now, I guess. But I might say that we need to go to +Q -Q depending on how things go. By the way, my name is Martin Duke. I'm a IETF guy. I work for F5, and I'm just the MC today. Thanks. Okay, so why are we here? Most of you probably know this, but an email went out a little over a month ago, or almost a month ago, to the OpenSSL mailing list, and essentially, in spite of, I think, broad expectation that OpenSSL would eventually support the APIs for QUIC support that numerous forks had provided. They've elected not to do that as a near-term or even medium-term objective, and instead they're going to do a full QUIC implementation. A full QUIC implementation with all the complexity that involves. So there's a little bit of background noise. Can we mute that, please? So there was a PR to take the boring SSL API for QUIC and just bring it into OpenSSL, which they closed. This PR had been open for 2 or 3 years, and this has a number of implications I think are bad for this community. One is that there's a number of QUIC implementations and users that are stranded that we're sort of counting on it, that currently use OpenSSL forks, and we're hoping that it will eventually go into the mainline. You see a few listed there. Another concern is QUIC is really hard to implement. Many of the people in this room have implemented QUIC personally and know that it's a fair number of developer years, and there are opportunity costs in that. And there's a QUIC community here, but there's also a TLS community that really wants the various things in the TLS working group that are going on to get implemented. DTLS 1.3 is one, encrypted client hello, et cetera. And if the OpenSSL team's focused on doing this, they're not doing that. And then finally, QUIC is going to keep changing. It's designed to be extensible. There are a ton of extensions currently under development. And the OpenSSL team is, in principle, committing to keep up with that stuff or eventually becoming obsolete. Meanwhile, the RFC 9001 interface, which is the way that QUIC and TLS work with one another, is not locked in stone, but is pretty likely not to change, and is kind of the stable API that I think the OpenSSL community is seeking. Oh, that's really all I had to say on that. If somebody has something they want to contribute right now to that effect, they're welcome to. Otherwise, we'll just move right into Rich talking about the OMC decision.
Okay, I'll start. Conclusion, you should take some of what I say with a grain of salt, and I'll give you some history about why. So I was working with OpenSSL for far too long, since it was back when it was SSL-EAY. Teams with me did the first thread locking work that's all thrown out for POSIX threads and so on. At another company, we did the OCSP support. So I joined the project after Heartbleed, and pretty much led the revitalization of the project. Other people did the crypto, because that's not my forte. And in particular, I drove the relicensing effort, finding all the previous contributors, getting to say, yes, we're fine with you relicensing under Apache and so on. I left in 2018. I had stayed in, that's like 3 years ago. I don't know, 3+ COVID years. I stayed on involved because Akamai, my employer, uses it. And then once 3.0 was done, I said I'm just going to leave because then we needed to have a FIPS. Akamai needed to have a FIPS solution, and we were using OpenSSL. So they released it. We have one, and I'm gone. That was the theory. The point of that is to say, well, I haven't been involved in the project directly and in terms of management or organization for 3+ years. I was a participant in the FIPS work as a sponsor with Akamai, but I know how things worked, and I know many of the people, and I'm still intertwined. You know, I still get emails from many of them. So the organizational structure. There's the OMC, the OpenSSL management, and this is modeled kind of after Apache. OMC is sort of the official voice of the project. They control the purse. They've got a fair amount of money right now because a lot of people paid them to support the old FIPS module. And they set the overall direction. They run the website. Actually, you know, Akamai fronts it, but they run, you know, they run the website. And they are the voice, the management voice of the project. The OTC is the technical committee and is officially called the technical voice of the project. They implement the OMC directions. So for example, in the 3.0 release, the OMC said, we want FIPS. We want it in a 3.0 release. And from now on, the FIPS work and the main OpenSSL work should proceed together. So the OTC had some design work. They've implemented that in the 3.0 release. An interesting effect to point out here is one OTC member must approve every single PR. It can be 2 OTC members, but it must be 1. If you're a submitter on the OTC, then it's assumed you approve. So you can get, like Matt and Rich could approve each other's pull requests, and that's legit. The third category in the organization are committers. They can be one of the approvers. Other than that, they're no different than, say, I am. Anyone can make a PR. In theory, a committer, when they submit one, has 1 vote, and then they just need to get somebody on the OTC. Fellows, that's the term OpenSSL has used for a long time, about developers who are funded by the project. There are like 5 of them, maybe 4. They're planning on hiring more. There's a mailing list, OpenSSL-project. It's moderated. You can join it and watch it, and that's where they post project news. For example, the requirements for the upcoming releases, monthly reports from the fellows about what they're doing, where you can find out, oh yeah, we're behind on hiring people because I'm still writing job descriptions, that sort of stuff. The key point here is they're kind of all intertwined. The OMC is 6 people, 6 active people. 3 of them are fellows. The OTC is 10 people, and 6 of them are on the OMC and or are fellows. Finally, the committers, 8 of them are OMC, OTC, or fellows. So it's important, I think, if you're going to reach out to people, that you understand how they overlap and who is sort of officially in charge, who's technically in charge, and who can do other work. And also who's paid by the project, presumably to do the OMC specified work. Martin, next slide. Okay, so what QUIC needs, from a TLS library, as Martin said, 9001, using TLS to secure QUIC. That's the theory. In practice, Google updated the boring SSL, and a whole bunch of other QUIC implementations used it. I believe other TLS implementations provided the same API. It wasn't just, David Benjamin gets the credit because he gave me the commits to look at when we wanted to port it. But there was a handful of people at Google handful of people on the TLS and QUIC teams because it's kind of subtle. Interactions with the key mechanism in early, zero RTT and things like that are not immediately obvious. So Akamai, mainly in the person of Todd Short, we ported those patches to OpenSSL. We created a pull request. It was about 20 functions, data types added to the existing base of about 6,000. Modified, 36 files, including error codes and man pages, out of roughly 24,000. 1,500 lines of code out of 625,000, and I just did rough counts. Looked at the diff and counted the minuses and the pluses and so on. So those were approximate. That's why they all say nearly, roughly, and so on. When we made the pull request, OpenSSL said no, not now. We're busy focused on FIPS. So we gotten approached by Nick and Sam from Microsoft to say, hey, what can we do here? So we forked OpenSSL's releases 1.1 and the nascent and then official 3.0 release into a project called QUIC-TLS. We told OpenSSL we were doing this, and we had a discussion with them about things like, what can we name the project? We shouldn't name it OpenSSL TLS, OpenSSL QUIC or OpenQuick, because they were concerned about confusion. There's an FAQ that explains how we're doing this now so that people can depend on it. We had discussions within Akamai and Microsoft about how will we make sure that we follow, CVE fixes and so on. So they knew what was going on. Next slide, please. Sorry, just one point. When they said not now, they'd always, if you read their blog posts, they always said, oh, we might do a quick implementation. I don't think anybody thought they would. So it was a fairly small amount of code. It had a huge impact. The pull request had over 230 comments, including from people like Martin, Lucas, the chair of the, co-chair of the QUIC working group, Lars, chair of the IETF, stepped in. None of them were particularly supportive of OpenSSL going their own way. There were only a few useless ones. If you want to know how to get useless comments, try to change some language. Just leave it at that. The OpenSSL had posted a blog. And as I said, it said, we'll revisit after 3.0 is done, see what kind of APIs needed. Maybe we'll do a full implementation. I think many, many people weren't worried about that. While Martin mentioned in one of his slides that a lot of people were then stranded because OpenSSL wasn't doing anything. As far as we can tell, everyone who was stranded, all of those groups, just moved to QUIC-TLS. They might support other QUIC stacks or other TLS stacks. NGHTTP2 is showing up in Debian unstable using GNU TLS, for example, because that was already in Debian. But everyone has moved to QUIC-TLS, and everyone, seemed to be doing okay. I mean, literally all of them. Okay, the project, now here's where we get into my view. This bullet in particular is like the opinion-based and experience-based. You saw in a previous slide, I showed how long I've been involved with OpenSSL. I think the project is scared that this is going to be commoditized and that OpenSSL is now going to be displaceable. I don't know what other projects have implemented a large part of the OpenSSL API to make it really displaceable. I don't know what projects are QUIC only and don't need other TLS or cryptographic functions. Certainly, the closest thing to OpenSSL is Libre TLS, which has its own issues. But I've been told by more than one person within the project that yes, this is a commercial decision or a political decision because we don't want to have people easily able to swap OpenSSL out for something else that implements an API, in particular, an API that OpenSSL didn't define. I've seen this, I'm not surprised. This is the reasoning. I believe this is the reasoning, but again, my opinion from looking on the outside, again, 3 years being on the outside. Earlier on, when I was in the project, I tried to get OpenSSL to agree to do Libra's libTLS, OpenBSD's libTLS. No interest, again, because it wasn't our API. And then SALT, NACL, a simple crypto API. And again, no, because it's not our API, we need to control it. So I think that's the opinion bullet. Everything else is kind of factually based. The most effective thing, I think, will be not to jump and tell the OpenSSL project, no, you're doing this all wrong, but to explain that their fears are misplaced. And in fact, we're already starting to see, I think, displacement happening because they're not supporting the QUIC community, right? Akamai, and I'm sure we're not the only ones, we need Google QUIC and we want OpenSSL. So that's why, with Microsoft, who also supports multiple TLS stacks, we created QUIC TLS. The project structure, which I described on that previous slide, although the intertwined part, you have to sort of pull apart the names and numbers and see, is at the link there. My conclusion, there is no open form of feedback into the project. So I suggest you just mail to the OMC and explain why you are concerned. I had heard they were going to come up with a response. I had posted a note to the moderated mailing list. Kudos to them for approving it. That detail all the reasons why I thought it was wrong. Maybe they'll have a comment forum. Maybe you can open up issues in the GitHub repo, but that's my suggestion. So before I bow out, if there's any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
So, Rich, I just want to be crystal clear on what we think would be effective for people to do. Should like individual engineers write to OMC and kind of make their own version of this argument, or should like they talk to their managers, for lack of a better term, to like write a thing on corporate letterhead that, or organizational letterhead that says, foo.com does not support, would really like to see a boring SSL API or what?
So I think both, right, as the old commercial goes, why not both? I think hearing from the people in the project are programmers for the most part. One person is the CEO or CTO of a small business he founded, but the people involved are programmers, and so they might be acceptable or open to hearing programmer concerns. I also think if you want to write, and it doesn't have to be an official corporate announcement. Martin and I and a couple others had a side meeting at the Linux Foundation last week, and some people were saying, okay, well, yeah, we'll get together and do a public statement encouraging OpenSSL to change their plan. Unclear if that will, probably will go forward because OpenSSL means a lot to a lot of people and we want it to stay usable. But yeah, company, corporate or management, I'm sorry, I'm looking at the chat and shouldn't. It needn't be an official Microsoft statement. It could be just an email saying, I am the development manager of a project at so-and-so, and this decision concerns me. And we will be, we'll begin looking at other TLS stacks. Who knows? But yeah, I think any input that they get across the board, it couldn't hurt. Now, you get too much, and you're going to see people digging in their heels, right? That's common in our field, right? We have programmers, we have personality quirks. You might have seen some of that on, Victor's comments on the TLS group, which is like, no, you have no right to express an opinion about what this project does at the IETF. Okay, fine. But again, that's my suggestion. I don't want to say what people should do. I think they should react, but I don't see any reason not to one way or another give any opinion. Hope that helps.
All right, I'd like to open it up for any other questions of Rich, as this is kind of the point to discuss. This is the point in the meeting where we want to discuss just ways to.
You want to do the forking slide?
Well, no, I actually wanted to stop here and like take a moment to like air concerns or discuss strategies or ask questions about how to shape the OMC's decision, and then we can talk about forking. Unless there are no questions.
So this is.
Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Oh, I was going to say, I have a question. You know, currently this is not, I mean, it's not really a big problem because we have QUIC TLS and we can use it. I mean, how long will it be before distros start pulling in 3.0 and that becomes a real serious problem that it's difficult to overcome? Anybody got any ideas?
So,
Sam?
I stuck my hand up not to answer David's question. Sorry, Daniel's question. So if anyone else has the answer to that, please go ahead. Looking at the chat.
So this is Todd Short. As the main primary developer of QUIC TLS here, because I'm the one who did the initial PR. Our goal is to continue to support 1.1.1 and 3.0 until they are no longer supported by upstream, and that means for at least the next year or two, based upon the current support model of OpenSSL. Now, the big question really becomes, once 3.1 or 4.0 or whatever the next release of OpenSSL is that may or may not support a version of QUIC, whether or not we can incorporate those APIs into that version is still an unknown. But at the very least, our intent is to continue to support 1.1.1 and 3.0.
Rich, do you have something to add?
no, not at this point. I'm really more curious to hear what everybody else thinks. Also, in that release announcement, I guess I'll just add some of the facts. They said they know QUIC will take more than one release, and their goal is to do a release every 6 months. That ain't going to happen. As I mentioned, FIPS was 2 years late, and that was all about cryptography that they understood. So I don't think we have to do anything now, but within a couple, we should start, people who care should start making their views known to the project before they get too far down that path. Martin said, presumably OpenSSL QUIC will need to implement functions to support 9001. Yeah, but they're planning on doing it in a very different way. They are planning on making the record layer pluggable, so you can plug in your own things at the various parts of the record layer. I'm not quite sure how that would work with QUIC. There's a really good comment in the PR from Ben Kaduk about pointing out some of the technical things that they've elided in their description. And yes, Lucas, the plan is implement from scratch. They've been reading other code, and the plan is to implement the whole thing from scratch.
Sam.
I just wanted to kind of say here, like, our goal really is not like, we don't want to fork OpenSSL. We kind of felt we had to because we didn't have the functionality we needed to be able to deliver, in Akamai's case, a service, and in Microsoft's case, a product. Boring SSL has kind of demonstrated what can happen when things fork, and they're not necessarily good for the overall community. So the purpose for this meeting was to try and get people together to help lobby the OpenSSL to say, like, you are a critical part of internet infrastructure, and we need you to kind of implement this functionality to enable the internet to continue to move forward. QUIC is showing a lot of promise in dealing with the P95, P99 kind of latency issues for connections. And so it will do a lot of good for sites to have that capable. But right now, OpenSSL is kind of one of the main blocking factors from getting widespread adoption.
DKG?
Thanks. So I wanted to just ask whether we're even asking the right question here. I think what. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Great. Okay, so one of these questions is about whether we're concerned about a fork, and the other question is whether we're concerned about a specific API. I mean, I think one of the fears that I've heard expressed here is that there's going to be some completely idiosyncratic API that OpenSSL supports, and because of their existing deployed reach, people are just going to accept that they're going to adopt this idiosyncratic API, and then that will result in sort of the quick development in the broader scale being held hostage by the OpenSSL team. And I'm wondering if another way to approach this beside a fork is to get a standard QUIC API out there before they've implemented theirs, get people to adopt the standard QUIC API via other QUIC stacks, and then they won't have much of a choice but to just follow that, like to at least emit that API if they want folks who've already adopted QUIC to adopt their version. Does that make sense? I mean, I know that the IETF doesn't specify APIs generally, but I've been writing a draft on I mean, it's a different protocol, but on OpenPGP, of just like trying to make a simple API that does the basic thing that most people who want to use OpenPGP will do. And of course, every implementation is going to do more than that API, but if they can standardize on that API, then that does commoditize the sort of baseline questions. So why should we be thinking also about an API approach that doesn't worry about forking and assumes that they'll be sort of forced to follow it once the API is widely adopted and in use?
Well, I could take a shot at responding. So I think there's two levels of API that we're talking about here. So the QUIC API to applications is not standard. In fact, my understanding of the issue is that there's quite a bit of divergence in what is already out there, and so it would be hard to standardize. But what we're talking about is the TLS QUIC API, which is standardized, not in so many words, but in RFC 9001 on what the kind of the data items that TLS needs to provide to QUIC and vice versa to be successful. And it is not clear to me that the OMC is planning to have a public API for those interfaces. If they did, it's not clear if I mean, even if they did, I'm not sure that it would be anything like the boring SSL API, which is what the existing implementations are using. So it would probably be if they had a QUIC TLS API that was just different and everyone had to eat the cost of making that change, that might be a survivable issue. But I think, although unpleasant, but like I think what they're talking about is not really having that at all and just using a total QUIC API, which means that you are stuck with OpenSSL's QUIC implementation, which I'm going to just venture is likely to be behind in terms of features and performance of the other QUIC implementations that are out there. I hope that's a useful response. Anyone else want to add anything on that subject?
Yeah, I'd like to add on that, Martin. From our dealings and discussions with the OMC, the understanding that I came away with is their goal is to first and only make a QUIC API, essentially implement the QUIC protocol and expose that. Sometime later, only once that's been deployed and shipped, would they expose the necessary APIs for other QUIC QUIC implementations to use them. So essentially the TLS layer for QUIC would be after all that. As far as from our perspective at Microsoft, we don't care too much what the API looks like. We already support multiple different TLS libraries, so we already have to handle the diversity there. But we need something from OpenSSL to be able to leverage it. So at least from our perspective, the problem is not that it's not going to be the API we want. It's that they're not exposing anything that we can use.
Stephen Farrell.
Yeah, so full disclosure, I guess I'm not particularly implementing QUIC or anything like it, but I am implementing ECH. So my interest is more in terms of that. And so 2 questions. One is to Rich or whomever, has the OMC changed a history of changing its mind before or of never doing that? And the second question is, if they go down their current road, planned road, would there be space for taking other kind of PRs like ECH or whatever, or would they just be 100% doing QUIC for the next 2 years?
I'm sure we've changed our minds back when I was involved. Maybe it wasn't as transparent. That's different than some people on the OMC who I would characterize who have never ever been wrong in their view. And that, I'm not saying any names, I don't want to be unfair. As to what happens with other pull requests, if you go back to page 8 when you get a chance, Martin, there's requirements about how PRs get approved. Nope, sorry, back one more. And if you look, you have to get, a committer to do it. Many of them, a plurality of them are already on the project, and you have to get the OTC to do it, and a majority of them are on the project. If they have time, I don't know. If the project decides to add more people, I don't know. Can't tell.
Okay, but you're
So
basically
Rich,
saying that, sorry, just clarify, Rich. When you say the project, you mean implementing QUIC according to their plan, and you're basically saying that a whole chunk of their resources, like a large chunk, is being devoted to this, so bandwidth for something else is probably going to be small.
I think a large chunk is going to be devoted to this. I also think they underestimate the problem, so a larger chunk will be devoted to it. And they are also trying to hire people, but they're behind on that.
And also, I have 2 PRs for, RFCs, 8879, along with the corresponding compressions for certificate compression and raw public keys, which are complete features. And they are big. They are actually, I think, bigger than the QUIC changes, and nobody has looked at them over the past several months. So while they may be willing to accept, like ECH or other types of features, it's going to, because of the size and scope of some of those features, it's going to take longer for them to get in, rather than, looking at much smaller changes that are easier to pull in, to be frank.
John Matson.
Yeah, I don't really need QUIC right now, but that all the great things that the TLS working group is working on and producing is not going to be implemented anytime soon is really scaring me. I would like a lot of things, and especially the TLS 103, I would like it very, very soon. And now it seems that that's not a priority at all for OpenSSL. I don't know if any other library will step in, but a lot of critical infrastructure is running on OpenSSL right now. And then if OpenSSL is not doing anything, that infrastructure will be stuck on like old versions. And just changing libraries, probably it's doable, but it's a hassle also.
Yeah, John, DTLS 1.3 was explicitly called out as something that is secondary to the QUIC work, and they're not going to do it.
Andrei Popov.
Hi, so I just have a quick clarifying question. So from past discussions with the OpenSSL Management Committee, I recall that their plan was, at least as I understood it, was to implement QUIC behind their existing APIs, so that applications using their current OpenSSL APIs could just, could end up negotiating QUIC. Is this still the plan? So are they still planning to basically encapsulate it within the existing API?
They certainly plan to expose a limited QUIC stack that can be used without major code changes. If they also intend, as they add more things, like, for example, multiplexing isn't in their first release, presumably they'll have to add other APIs or something. Don't know what the plans are, and I don't think they know either.
Right, but to me, this is an interesting question because this is kind of strategic, right? So either their goal is to just, avoid changes to applications, but enable as much QUIC functionality as possible within existing APIs, or maybe, evolve their APIs for more complete QUIC features over time. That could be driving their decision to basically have their own QUIC implementation inside, rather than being a library that a QUIC implementation calls into, right?
Sure.
So that's kind of an important architectural question there from the technical perspective. Depending on what they want, that would drive their decision.
Yeah, it's a good point. It's as valid a theory as mine.
Eric.
But I think even then a question becomes, what value is there to what you'd actually run over this? Because if you look at the protocols built on top of QUIC, like H3 or DNS over QUIC or other things, it's not just that you can't just use a standard, here's a socket. You need deeper integrations with the QUIC stack to actually implement those protocols properly. So there might be some value for some, just give me a pure point-to-point connection for transferring data, kind of the client server type use case. But beyond that, it's going to be really hard to do most QUIC things with just the OpenSSL library interface.
Right, understood.
All right, the queue is clear. Maybe we could just move on to Sam's slide and let him talk a little bit. If we aren't able to affect the change in what OpenSSL plans to do, then I guess we're stuck with a fork, and he's going to talk to some of the challenges there.
Yeah. So as said, after Akamai and us had kind of independently talked with OpenSSL, and the 8797 PR was it 97? I can never remember which way around it is. After the PR was kind of roundly rejected, and there seemed to be no indication of any movement. From a Microsoft side, I work on .NET. We wanted to implement HTTP 3. And so working with Nick and Daniel, who are on kind of the Windows networking side, they implemented MS QUIC. We needed a TLS API. So talked to Akamai, and we ended up deciding to create a fork, which is, at the moment, it is a very lightweight fork over the top of OpenSSL. The goal was not to become something kind of long-term and divergent, which is what boring SSL has become, but to just implement the 8797 PR and follow OpenSSL as closely as possible. And we've done that, and it's sustainable at the moment, but we don't have broad adoption. And once you start getting adoption, that's where the problems come in. So creating the fork, that's easy. It's like, how do apps use it? And so there are kind of two choices there. They can statically link it in, which is initially the simplest. You don't require distribution by dependent distribution by Linux distros, etc. But then your app is responsible for updates. And given that we're talking about SSL and crypto APIs, etc., this is a critical security component being up to date on security updates is really important. The other would be dynamic linking, but then that requires the distribution, the Linux distro, to include the library, or you need to kind of include it as part of your app dependencies. And so it's then how do we get this widely distributed, and what happens as part of the broader ecosystem. So support is kind of one of our major concerns. How do we support, like, if there is if this becomes a long-term thing, how do we manage security incidents? How do we ensure that we keep up to date with OpenSSLs, but also any QUIC specific implementation, QUIC specific issues? OpenSSL already has a kind of a pre-announce where there were flight changes before they go public, as long as it's in kind of 0 day. We would need to be part of that, but we also then need to have our own process for any specific issues in the fork. So that requires kind of human infrastructure in being able to accept the CVEs and reports, triage them, investigate them, fix them, communicate with appropriate partners, etc. The other side of this is then distribution. Does Red Hat, Debian, etc., want to start including QUIC TLS in their distros? Is it then supplemental to OpenSSL or a replacement? Again, depending on how far we go in terms of forking and divergence, if it's just additions, it's not too bad. One of the big issues for everyone has been FIPS. Right now, because the fork doesn't change anything at the crypto layer, we can dynamically load distros' copy of libcrypto that can be FIPS certified, so we handle that. But if we diverge anymore, are we going to touch those parts? So there's a lot of kind of open questions there. And then, as you've heard, there seems to be a bit of community dissatisfaction, not only around implementing QUIC, but other features such as DTLS. How far do we go with this? Do we end up being a truly diverged SSL implementation? And then what's that mean for the community overall? I think it's best, frankly, for the community for there to be one, and OpenSSL right now is that de facto implementation. I don't want to be the owner of a replacement, but they may force our hand. So again, I'm going to be really clear. We'd much prefer them to be more open to accepting changes and kind of see where the community wants things and address that. If they don't, we'll have to step up and look at alternative solutions such as the fork. Sorry, that was a long spiel.
No, it was great. Thank you, Sam. Okay, so we got 40 minutes left, which we don't have to fill up, but that's kind of the extent of our planned program here. And I would like to open the floor for comments, concerns, further questions about any of this. Okay, there are no hands up. So I guess so the takeaways for today, I would summarize as number one: you are not alone if you're concerned about these changes, whether or not it's whether or not you're a TLS person or a QUIC person. That you consider as an individual engineer and as a corporate organizational representative, letting the OMC know in a polite way, in a constructive way, that that QUIC functionality would be a very useful thing for OpenSSL to do. To be more precise, a QUIC TLS API consistent with RFC 9001 would be a useful thing for the community that would actually enhance OpenSSL standing rather than detract from it, in your view, especially if you represent an organization that is an important part of the OpenSSL ecosystem. Anything that I should add that you would add, Rich or Todd or Mike? Sam, rather?
No. As I said, I think my view, the point to make is you're going to get what you're scared of if you keep down this path. And inciting a mob to storm the castle and say, "Don't, this is wrong," is not the way to do it, but be polite, respectful, and say, "No, really, you're now making us look elsewhere, whereas before we didn't have to." If that's in fact what you're doing, you know, and whoever says that, every little bit helps. And I also fully agree with everything that was just said on the slide here. You know, I don't want to own a fork either.
And I certainly don't want to own a fork either as well. And I've been doing most of the development work on this, and I'm the original patch creator. So, I mean, I've obviously said a big thing because I created the patch and said, "Here, please take this." And, you know, just to respond back to, I guess it's DKG, I would love it if, you know, Boring and OpenSSL and the Chromium folks and any other TLS or QUIC provider were to come together and say, "Hey, you know what? This is let's define an API that can be used between, you know, the QUIC software and the TLS software." I would love that. I unfortunately don't see it happening without cooperation between all the groups involved.
Let me make sure the queue is clear. Mike Bishop.
So I think when we're thinking about what might be moving the OMC here, something that was raised in a conversation earlier today was that if you're sitting directly on top of OpenSSL, some percentage of those are customers paying for support. And that if your application no longer uses OpenSSL directly, fewer people might be motivated to pay. And so there might be some fear not just of ease of portability, but also like what's the motivation to pay them for something. And I don't know what that financing model looks like if they're underneath a QUIC stack they're not paying for. But it's something to consider when we're trying to convince them that what they think is in their best interest might not be.
If no one else is going to say it, I will. Money talks. I'm going to be quite frank there.
Martin, if you're talking, you're muted.
Okay, great. Sorry, thank you for that. I was just waxing. It was very poetic what I said, and now it's lost forever. So it sounds like we're reaching a natural stopping point here. I hope that people have a better understanding of what the problems are, that recognize they're not alone if they're concerned, and have some idea on how they might be able to affect some positive change. Feel free to, you can contact any of us if you would like to discuss this further. I know Rich's email is on the wiki there, and mine is on the slide. Did somebody have the list of people and email addresses from Teams? It's certainly not me. Nick?
Let me look. Let me see if I can get that. As someone already mentioned, anyone who signed in as a guest, I believe, does not have to provide an email anyways.
Okay. Well, you can email me if for some reason you're not listed in the manifest there, and you would like to be included in future conversations, communications about this. Again, I don't want to start a mailing list. We shouldn't have an internal complaining channel. That's not productive. Like, the discussion should happen out in the OpenSSL community. We're not trying to fragment the community and have our own little complaint line. So we're not going to create a list. But if there's some follow-up that we need to do, we will email people. Let's see, chat. Okay. So with that, looks like we are all set. So thank you all very much for joining, and enjoy the rest of your day, or have a pleasant sleep if that's your correct time zone. Have a good one, everybody. Thank you.
Thanks for running it, Martin.
Thanks, Martin and Rick. Bye.
Take care, everybody. Good meeting. Hope this works out for everybody.